In 1952, in a frame house outside Marion, Indiana, a woman named Ruth put 1 dime in a Christmas Club book every Friday before she started the wash. 1 dime. 52 of them. Not a budget, not a windfall, not money she had spare. My mother kept a book like it in a drawer and never missed a Friday. That dime wasn't small because Ruth was poor. It was small on purpose. It was a size she could hit on the week the coal bill came, and the week the baby was sick, and every ordinary week in between. There's a rule sitting inside that dime, and it's a rule with 3 moves to it, and it still works. I could hand you the 3 moves in 90 seconds. I'm not going to, and there's a reason. The first move is the one everybody thinks they already understand, and it's the one everybody gets wrong by making it bigger, so we'll go slow. By the end, you'll have the whole of it, and you'll know why the size is the point. I'm Ida. I grew up in a house where money got counted out loud on a Friday night, a book, a tin, an envelope with the rent in it, and everyone had a job. I watched my mother do it, then went and found the rest written down. Let's begin. Start with what the dime actually was, because it wasn't saving the way we mean it now. Ruth wasn't putting aside what was left at the end of the week. There was nothing left at the end of the week. That was the whole condition of the house, and it was the condition of most houses on that road. The dime went in on Friday morning, before the shopping, before the coal money got counted out, before anything else had a chance to speak for it, and it went in at the same size every single Friday, whether the week had been kind or whether it had been the worst week of the year. 52 dimes is $5.20. In 1952, that was a pair of school shoes for a child with a little over, and nobody in that house ever sat down and decided to save $5. They just carried a dime down the road on a Friday 52 times, and the $5 happened to them. Here's what I want you to notice, friend. Nothing in that arrangement required a good year. It didn't require a raise or a bonus or a run of calm months. It required a dime and a Friday, and Ruth had both of those in the bad years, too. That's not a small distinction. That's the entire difference between the way they did it and the way it gets sold to us now. Because look at what gets handed round today. Save 1/5 of what comes in. Save 1/4 of it. Put by 3 months of your outgoings, and then 6, and then a year, and there's a calculator on the screen that will tell you cheerfully how long that takes. And every one of those plans has the same thing built into its bones. It assumes there's a surplus sitting there waiting to be told what to do. It's arithmetic written for a household that ends the month with something over, handed to households that don't. Now, I want to be careful here, because I'm not pointing at anybody in this room. A plan that only works in a smooth month isn't a test of anybody's character. It's a plan that was drawn up in an office by people whose own months are smooth and then sold wide because it sounds respectable and it costs nothing to print. 1/5 of what's left over, when there's nothing left over, is nothing. That's not a failure. That's just what that arithmetic gives you. And when the plan falls over in the second month, and it does it to good people every day of the week, the plan gets to walk away clean and the household gets to carry the disappointment. I don't think that's a fair trade, and I don't think it was ever an accident. There's money in selling a method. There's no money at all in telling someone plainly that a dime on a Friday would do it. And there's one more thing wrong with a plan built on a percentage, which almost nobody says. It assumes the money arrives the same size every time. That was never true for the houses I came up in. The farm income came in 2 great lumps a year at the mercy of weather and a buyer 40 miles off. The works ran short weeks in the winter and overtime in the spring. My father's pay in a bad February and my father's pay in a good June were not the same animal, and a plan that wanted a fixed 1/5 of both was going to be wrong in one direction or the other every single month of the year, which is exactly why the eggs mattered so much, and I want to give the eggs their due. On a farm, the eggs were hers. That was the old settlement, and it held in a great many houses. 12 hens laying decently gave 5 or 6 dozen a week to sell, and eggs ran around 40 cents a dozen through the middle of the 1940s. Call it $2 a week, arriving in her hand every single week, in a household where the real income showed up twice a year in a shape nobody could plan around. The crop was the wealth. The eggs were what the house actually ran on. And when the crop failed and it did the thing that carried everybody through, wasn't the big, unreliable money. It was the small, dependable stream. Before we go on, tap subscribe. Not for me, neighbor, for the handing down. This is where these get said out loud again, and you'll want the next one. So where does the rule come from? Not from a bank, and not from anybody with letters after their name. My uncle laid tile for 31 years. Kitchens, shop floors, the lobby of a hotel he never once let us forget about. And I asked him, I'd have been about 14, and I asked it the way a 14-year-old asks things, which is rudely I asked how he could stand to start a floor that was going to take him 4 months. He looked at me like I'd said something foolish, and he said he'd never laid a floor in his life. He set the next tile. That was the whole answer, and I didn't understand it for about 20 years. The lobby wasn't his business. The lobby was too big to be anybody's business. His business was one tile, level and true, and then, once that one was down and right, the one after it. 31 years of that, and behind him there were acres of finished floor he'd never once thought about as acres. Now, that is exactly what Ruth was doing on a Friday morning, and she'd never have put it that way either. She wasn't saving for a coat. The coat was too far off to be any use to her. She was putting in the dime. And the reason this matters more than any calculator is what a great big number actually does to a person. If you write down that you need a year of survival, and the figure comes to something with 4 numbers in it, and you're standing at nothing, that figure doesn't pull you forward. It doesn't encourage anybody. It stands up at the far end of the room and it argues against you every single time you look at it. 12 months of looking at a gap does not build anything. It just teaches you what the gap looks like. The big plans don't die of arithmetic, friend. They die of the view. So the question my uncle handed me without ever meaning to is the only question that matters at the front end of this. Not how much do I need, what's my tile? And you work it out like this. And it takes one evening. You want your bare number, not your comfortable number, the number the house actually needs to keep standing. Rent or the mortgage, the heat and the light, food, the plain kind. Whatever gets you to work, the insurance you can't be without, the telephone, that's the list, and nothing else goes on it. No coffee, no birthdays, no anything that makes life pleasant, because this isn't a budget. This is the floor. Whatever that comes to for 1 month, that's your month. 12 of them is your year, and then you divide the year by 50. That number you get is your count. And here's the part, I mean seriously, you write it down once on a bit of paper, and then you put the paper in a drawer, and you don't look at it again. Not next month, not next year. You wrote it down so it exists. That's all it was ever for. I'd guess that figure came out larger than you were expecting, and I'd guess it gave you a turn. Let it. It's the last useful thing that number is ever going to do for you, and after tonight it has no further business in your life. You are not building a year. Nobody has ever built a year. You're laying a brick, and there'll be another Friday after this one. And notice what the old houses did with the same problem, because they had it too. Ruth never wrote down what a winter coat cost. The Christmas Club book didn't have a target printed in the front of it. What the book had was a line for each week and a place for the teller's stamp, and the only thing you could see when you opened it was how many stamps were already in there, not the distance left. The distance covered. My mother wrote her figures on an envelope and put it behind the clock, and I never once saw her take it down again. Move one, then. The brick. $50 is one brick, and a brick is the only size your saving is allowed to come in. Not a year. Not the count you wrote on the paper. One brick, $50, and it goes on payday, the same day, every time, and early in the day, before the money has been anywhere or spoken to anyone. And you set it up once on a machine so that it happens whether you're thinking about it or not. That last part isn't laziness. That's the whole engineering of it. Because here's what they knew and we forgot. Willpower is a thing that runs down over a week, the same as anything else does. By Friday afternoon, there isn't much of it left in anybody, and a plan that needs a decision every Friday afternoon is a plan resting on the thinnest part of the week. A standing transfer has never had a bad Friday. It has never been tired, or discouraged, or perfectly reasonable about why this once doesn't count. You make the decision one time, on the day you set it up. After that, the machine does the mornings. And the size is the point, so let me say it plainly. 50 is not a starting figure that you graduate from. 50 is the figure. It's chosen small enough that the worst fortnight of your year can still pay it, because a saving is never built by the strong months, it's built by not stopping in the weak ones. $50 every other payday is $1,300 in a year, laid down 26 times. That's before we've talked about the second move at all, and the second move is where the real building happens. But sit with the shape of it first. One decision, made once. One size, that doesn't move. One day, that comes round on its own. The Christmas Club book, where you picked your weekly figure in January and the bank held it till November, the banks kept your money interest-free, or near enough. Women queued for that, and they queued because they wanted the lock, not the interest. The stamp album, where a 10-cent stamp at the post office went into a book, and 187 of them filled it. The envelope box at the church, dated, one for every Sunday, every one printed for the same small amount. Every one of them the same idea. Small, fixed, on a set day, wrapped in something that happens anyway. And look at the arithmetic they were running, because it's the same arithmetic. 50 cents a week into a Christmas club, laid down 48 weeks running, came back as $24 just before Thanksgiving in 1948, and $24 that year was the coat, the shoes, the bird, and the tree, which is to say it was Christmas, paid for. Nobody in that house had $2 a month to spare. Everybody in that house could find 50 cents on a Friday. The stamp album is the cleaner example still. A savings bond cost $18.75 and paid back $25 10 years on. And 1875 was a wall for most houses. And a wall is where saving stops. So they broke it into dimes, a 10-cent stamp stuck in a book, 187 of them, and a nickel of change to fill it. A dime a day is 70 cents a week, which is $36.40 in a year. So a house putting a dime a day in filled that album in a bit over 6 months. Same bond, same $25. The only thing anybody changed was the size of the piece you had to be able to afford in one go, and that single change pulled in millions of households that the bond by itself would never have reached. And I'll say this plainly. If your bare month costs more than comes in, no saving habit closes that, and I'd never pretend otherwise. That's an income question, and it deserves its own hour. Move 2. The conversion, and this is the engine. The payday brick is only the heartbeat, steady, small, alive. What actually builds the wall is what happens to money that gets freed or found. Here's the rule, and it's got a clock on it. Any money that comes loose in your life, anything you cancel, anything that turns up, anything extra you earned becomes bricks within one day. Not that week, not when you get round to it. One day. Say you finally cancel a thing you've been paying for and not using, $11 a month or $19 or whatever it is. Under the ordinary way of things, that money doesn't go anywhere at all. It dissolves. The month simply expands to fill it, and by the third month you couldn't tell anybody where it went. Under this rule, it converts that's a brick, or a brick every couple of months, laid on the same day, forever, with the canceling as the reason it exists. A tax refund comes. That's the dangerous one, and it's dangerous in a specific way that has nothing to do with anybody being foolish. Money that arrives in a lump, unexpected, gets filed in a different drawer in a person's head than money that was earned on a Thursday. Everybody does this. It's not weakness. It's just how a mind sorts things, and every business that sells anything knows it perfectly well and prices accordingly. $1,000 that shows up out of nowhere spends about twice as fast as $1,000 you worked a fortnight for. So the rule doesn't argue with that, it just gets there first. Within 24 hours, that refund stops being a lump and becomes a count of bricks, 20 of them, or 22, laid down and finished, and out of reach of every good reason that was going to turn up on Saturday. A weekend shift you picked up covering for somebody. 2 bricks. Money back from an insurer that you weren't expecting. 1 brick. The odd few dollars left at the bottom of it put in as well for the pleasure of a clean number. That's how a $50 habit ends up building at 3 or 4 times a $50 pace. And the old houses were relentless about this in a way I don't think we've matched since. Green stamps are the one everybody remembers and nobody looks at properly. You got them at the grocery counter and the filling station, a sheet at a time, and one stamp was worth precisely nothing. That was the trick of it. They only became anything at all once you'd licked 1,200 of them into a book, and even then one book on its own didn't buy much. The catalog priced everything in books. A toaster was several of them. A wool blanket was several more. So a woman filled a book and set it in the drawer and filled the next one. And somewhere down the line there were enough of them stacked together to walk into the redemption store and come out with the thing. Nobody in that house ever decided to save for a blanket. They kept filling books, and the blanket happened to them. Coal is the other one, and it's the sharper lesson. Coal was cheapest in the dead of summer, when nobody was buying, and a yard would sell you a ton in July for $1 or more, less than the same ton cost in November when the wind turned and the whole town wanted it at once. Same coal, same seller, the only thing that changed was which month you were standing in when you bought it, and $1 on the ton in the 1930s was near enough 2 dozen eggs and a pound of butter, out of nothing but timing. But to buy in July, you had to have July's money already put by, which means the coal saving wasn't really a coal saving at all. It was the tin, cashing in. A little money in hand isn't luxury, neighbor. It's being allowed to choose the month. And it is precisely what the old houses did with the egg money and the tin on the shelf. The eggs went to town in a basket, and what the eggs brought back never went into the housekeeping purse. It went into a different container that same day, because $1 in the housekeeping purse is $1 that's already half spent. The tin wasn't hiding money from anybody. It was stopping the money from blurring into the other money before anyone had decided anything. I'll tell you one I got wrong. In my 30s, I saved in big proud lumps whenever a good month came, and I was pleased with myself. Then 2 thin months landed together, and I stopped for a year. Which brings us to move 3, and this is the strange one. It's also the one that saves the whole business in the 5th month. Under this rule, you are never allowed to make a saving decision bigger than $50. Not once, not ever. No putting in 300 this month because it's been a good month and you're feeling strong. No doubling up to catch yourself back to where you meant to be. If you want to lay 4 bricks in a good week, lay 4 bricks, 4 separate 50s, 4 small decisions, but no single decision bigger than the unit. Now, I know how that sounds. It sounds like I'm telling you to save less, and I'm not. I'm telling you something about the person who makes the big decision. The one who puts in 300 on a strong month is the same one who puts in nothing on a thin one. It's the identical instinct wearing 2 different coats. Whatever ambition it takes to make the grand gesture in June is exactly the ambition that goes quiet and stops answering in September, because a plan that runs on feeling strong has nowhere to be on the weeks you don't. The ceiling keeps the whole thing dull, and dull is what you want. You lay a brick, or you lay a few bricks, one small decision at a time. And here's what it buys you. On the month when the car makes that new sound and there is not one brick to be laid, nothing breaks. That's the part I want you to hold on to. A plan built on 1/5 of your income misses a month and dies of embarrassment because a missed month means you're behind. And behind means catching up, and catching up means a figure you were never going to manage, so you stop. A wall doesn't do any of that. A wall just waits. It's exactly as tall as it was last week. It isn't disappointed. And the next brick is $50, the same as every brick before it, with nothing owed and nothing to make up. They built that mercy into the objects, you know. The church envelope box with a missed Sunday that was simply a missed Sunday, no doubling, no ledger of failure, and the next envelope in the box printed for the same amount as all the others. And they built the other half of it in too, the part that stops you reaching back in. Every child in this country had a pot bank, a pig or a little house or a book shape with a slot in the top and no way out of it. Not a lid, not a plug in the base. You could work loose with a knife. To get the money, you had to break the thing, and once you'd broken it, it was broken. Now, that is a very strange way to design an object, and I'd ask you to sit with how strange it is. They deliberately built it so that taking money out cost you the container itself. Because the danger with a small saving was never that a person wouldn't start. People start all the time, people start 3 times. The danger is a Tuesday in the third month when there's a perfectly good reason to open it, and a lid would have let you. The pot bank made the small raid impossible and the large raid so final you'd think about it properly first. A penny a day into one of those was $3.65 by the year's end in 1954, and the child who broke it on a table with a hammer remembered the figure for life. That's your ceiling. In pottery, the rule and the pig are the same invention. None of that went quiet because people got careless. It went quiet because somebody worked out there was more money in you paying later. There were 2 houses on our road, and I've thought about them for 50 years. The wages in them were within a few dollars of each other. Same works, same shifts, same number of children, more or less. And both women started putting money by in the same season because they'd talked about it over a fence, the way these things always start. One of them picked the impressive figure. She was going to put by a proper sum every week, a figure that would have got her there in a year and a half, and she'd worked it out, and she was right about the arithmetic. For 2 months she made it, and I remember her being lit up about it, because there is nothing on this earth like the first 6 weeks of a plan that's working. Then her husband's hours got cut in the 3rd month, and the week missed. And in the 4th month, getting back to where she'd meant to be meant putting in double, and double wasn't in the house. So it stopped. Not with any announcement. These things never end with an announcement. It just stopped being a thing that happened on a Friday. She started again in the spring. Same figure, same wall, same ending, and I believe there was a 3rd time after that. The other one picked a figure so small that when she told my mother what it was, my mother didn't say anything, and I understood even at that age that not saying anything was a kindness. She was still putting it in 11 years later. Same road, same wages, same fence. And the only thing that ever separated those 2 houses was the size of the piece. One woman chose a figure for the weeks she felt strong, and the other chose a figure for the weeks she didn't. Now, there's an objection to all this, and it deserves saying out loud, so I'll say it myself. $50 is nothing, and at that rate the year takes a very long time. Both halves of that are fair. At a brick, a payday with a fair bit of conversion on top, a full year of survival is going to take most households something like 3 or 4 years to finish. I'm not going to dress that up prettier than it is. But the objection has a hole in it, and the hole is the whole reason this works. A year of savings does not have to be finished to be doing its job. And think about when the thing that actually matters arrives. I'll be straight with you about the arithmetic, because I'd rather you trusted me than felt encouraged. On the payday brick alone, $1,300 a year, your first full month of survival is better than a year away. That's the honest figure, and I'm not going to hide it. The conversions are what move it, and how far they move it depends entirely on how much there is in your life to convert. A household with 2 or 3 subscriptions to cancel and a refund coming in the spring will see that first full month somewhere in the first year, and often a good deal sooner. A household with nothing spare to find will take longer. Both of those are the rule, working exactly as designed. And that 4th month is the one where the 11 o'clock arithmetic stops. You know the arithmetic, I mean. The kind where a form comes home from school with a number on it that isn't even large, and it takes moving 4 other things around to make the month land. That stops, and it stops years before the wall is anywhere near finished. By month 14, there might be 3 months standing behind you, and by then something else has gone that's harder to describe. The particular listening you do to your own car. That goes, I'd rather have you understand this than any other thing I've said today. Every course of bricks is shelter. Not the finished wall, the courses. A wall 3 feet high is already keeping the wind off, and if you're waiting to feel safe until the last brick goes on, you've misunderstood what walls are for. One more thing, and then the last piece. Where the bricks sit matters more than people give it credit for, and this is the oldest argument in the business. There was a bill folded in the Bible in nearly every house I knew, a 10 pinned in a coat lining, a roll in a jar behind the preserves. It earned nothing at all, and the modern instinct is to call that a waste. But between 1,930 and 1,933, something like 9,000 banks, in this country shut their doors, and a great many people watched money they'd done everything right with simply stop existing. That folded bill wasn't superstition. It was a second system, kept deliberately outside the first one. And on the night it was needed, at 11 o'clock, with everything shut, it was the only money in the world that was actually reachable. And at the same time, those houses were using the post office. For 55 years, you could save at the same window where you bought a stamp. The Postal Savings System ran from 1911 to 1966 and paid you 2% a year. 2% on $20 in 1940 is 40 cents, which changes nobody's life. That was never the offer. The offer was that it would still be there, it was open when you were off work, and nobody at that window looked at your coat before they decided how to talk to you. So they ran both. A little where you could put your hand on it in the dark, and the rest somewhere it was working quietly and somebody was paying you for the use of it. That balance is worth an hour on its own, and it'll get one. Before I give you the last piece, ask yourself what all of it was really for, not the number, something underneath the number. Here it is, and it's an afternoon rather than a figure. Somewhere around the 11th month, the breaks go. The real thing, the grinding, the number you don't say out loud in front of the children. Say it's $380, and you stand at the counter, and you pay it, and you take your keys, and you drive home. And it isn't until you're turning into your own street that you notice what didn't happen. Nothing happened. No spiral, no kitchen table at midnight, no moving 4 things around to make a 5th thing fit. 7.5 bricks came off a wall that was holding 4 months of them, and the wall just absorbed it and stood there. That is the product, friend, not the count on the paper in the drawer. You were never going to look at that again anyway. The dull afternoon is the product. The quiet is the deliverable, and it arrives a very long time before the wall is done. And I'd like you to notice what it cost to buy that afternoon, because it wasn't $380. It was $50, laid down on a morning 11 months earlier when it felt like nothing at all, and then laid down again and again. On a run of Fridays, you'd not be able to tell apart now if your life depended on it. That's the honest shape of this. Every brick feels pointless at the moment you lay it. Not one of them ever feels like the one that mattered. And then a Tuesday arrives with a number on it, and the wall you built out of pointless mornings takes the whole weight of it without a sound, and you drive home. And that's what Ruth actually bought with a dime on a Friday morning in 1952, and it's what she'd have told you if you'd asked her, though I doubt she'd have used as many words as I have. She didn't buy a coat. She bought a house where a coat wasn't a crisis. You don't save a year. You lay a brick. And the best morning to lay the first one is the one you wake up to next. So tell me in the comments what your brick would be, your bare month, divided by 50, the honest count, and not the flattering one. And tell me whose kitchen table you first heard this at, because I'd like to know she's still being quoted.